Hi, fourth graders, welcome to our science class. Today we're going to learn about flowers and different parts of a flower. So let's get started. Here is a photo of our textbook and it's page number 52. If you walk through a park, you will see many kinds of plants. There may be tall trees, perhaps bushes, and flowers are growing in flower beds. Even the grass on the lawn is a plant. The Bible tells us that God planted a garden. In this garden, He put every tree that is pleasant to the sight and good for food. Genesis 2:8-9. God provided plants for Adam and Eve to enjoy as well as eat. One of the first jobs Adam had was to take care of the garden. His work could have been similar to that of a landscape architect. Like Adam, people who work with plants today study flowers and seeds. They study the life cycle of plants and how to classify them. They learn all they can about plants. All of this research is about if a person who handles plants wants to please the Lord in His work. Flowers. All living things reproduce or make more of the same kind. God made some plants with flowers to help the plants reproduce. A flower is the part of some plants that makes the seeds. Flowers come in many sizes, shapes, and colors. They may smell sweet or have no smell at all. Some even smell very bad to us, yet all flowers have an important job. They allow plants to reproduce. So let me highlight it. So all flowers have an important job, and that is reproducing. God designed each plant's flower to be exactly right for that plant. So let me pause there, and then let me just quickly recap what we read. So today, as I have mentioned, our topic is flower. And the reason why we see flowers, yes, it's for the beauty, but its main purpose is to reproduce. So reproducing is like creating something that's identical to itself. So for example, mother and father giving a birth, having a baby, that's reproduction. And flower is there to produce plants. Now let's go on and learn about flower parts. When you think of a flower, you most likely think of its petal first. The petals are often the most colorful part of a flower. So a petal is the most colorful part, and that's this yellow leaf thing, this big part. This we call petal. Some flowers, such as lilies or roses, have big, showy petals. The brightly colored petals attract insects and other animals. These living things help the plant reproduce. Other plants, such as some grasses, do not need other living things to help them reproduce. Their flowers often have petals that are very small and hard to see. Other parts of the flower is the stamen. Stamen is a thin stalk with a knob-like structure at its top. This knob-like structure produces the pollen. So that's where the pollen is produced. Pollen is made up of tiny dust-like grains. These grains of pollen are needed for the plants to reproduce. In the center of a flower is a long tube called the pistil. It's the part of a flower that receives the pollen. The top of the pistil is often sticky. This sticky surface helps trap pollen that lands on it. Okay, so let's look at the textbook drawing. This yellow leaf part, the most colorful part and the biggest part, is called petal. And the purpose is to attract insects and animals. And there are two other parts, and first one is stamen. And that is this knob-like stick. And this yellow part is where the pollens are. And then we have more stamen than pistil. Then what is a pistil? Pistil is the longest stick here in the center, and this receives pollen. So here are the pollens, and here are the pollen receiver. And here is the tricky part. Then how do pistil receive pollens when they are right beside to each other? So today during Zoom meeting, I have shown you a photo of a parts of a flower. And I mentioned that there are many different parts of the flower. However, you just need to remember the three things, which is petal, stamen, and pistil. And as this part shows, this whole thing from the top to the circular space, this whole orange thing is called pistil. And this top part is the pollen receiver. And here's the tube. So once the pollen lands on the top part of the pistil, it sends the pollen down through the tube and it finally arrives in this place called ovary. And this is where the fruit is produced. However, you don't need to remember the other parts, but just remember the three parts and their relationship. So that's why it's in the middle, because this is internal to the ovary where the fruits, the baby, is produced. Let's go to the next page. Flower pollination. A flower plant produces a seed in order to reproduce itself. For a seed to form, the pollen must move from the stamen to the pistil. The transfer of pollen to the pistil is called pollination. So pollination is moving pollen to the pistil. Plants are pollinated in different ways. In some flowers, the stamen is higher than the pistil. So let's look at this one. So we see the stamen and then the pistil in the center. And this is shorter, smaller than stamen. And this we call self-pollination because the pollen simply falls from the stamen to the pistil. As the wind blows, they sometimes stick together, and that's when the pollen transfers. And this is the easiest way because they don't need any helper. And this we called self-pollination. However, most plants do not self-pollinate. Usually, pollen is transferred from one plant to another plant. The wind is another way plants are pollinated. So one way is self-pollination, second way is through the wind. It carries the pollen from one plant to another. Grasses and grains such as wheat and corn are pollinated by wind. What are the examples of that? Grasses and grains. A third way of pollination is by animals. Flowers often store nectar. Nectar is the sweet part of the flower, the honey. Insects such as butterflies and bees eat or collect the nectar. As they move from flower to flower, they also transfer pollen. While in one flower, an insect brushes against the pollen, which sticks to the insect. When the insect goes to the next flower, the pollen may come off of the insect and stick to pistil in that flower. So this is a little too complicated to picture it. So I'm going to later show you a video. And this is one example. So the butterfly is sitting on the flower to gather the nectar. So let's go to the next, the final page. Insects are not the only animals that help pollinate flowers. Hummingbirds also feed on nectar. Like insects, they may transfer pollen as they move from one flower to another. Bats help pollinate many kinds of fruit trees. Some mango and peach trees rely on bats to move pollen from one tree to another. Without help from the bats, the trees could not reproduce. Animals and flowers help each other. A flower's shape may attract an animal. An animal may also be attracted by flower's color or odor. The flower is pollinated and the animals gets food. God designed the two to help each other in a partnership. So we have learned partnership in last chapter, and partnership is like this. The one animal or insect or one living thing is paired up with another living thing so that they can benefit each other, so that they can help each other. This is just one way God shows how he cares for living things. So now let's go and watch a video on pollination. So like I said, pollination is when a pollen from one flower is transferred to another flower so that you can go through a pistil. So here is a bee, and he's getting the nectar from the flower. And as we see, this is a special kind. Oh, let me pause here. So this is the stamen, and this yellow part is where the pollens are. And when we actually see closer, we see the pollens inside of it. Do you see the powder thing? And this is also another flower which carries nectar, and every single flower has a stamen and a pistil. And the bees are flying to get nectar. So this is a really good photo. So this little bee is finding for the nectar, and that's gathering the honey from the flower. And as it moves and as it searches through it, look at the pollen sticking on its legs. Do you see these yellow powdery parts? These are pollens. And then it's actually the bees are not, it's not intentional. They're just busy searching for the pollen. However, the pollens are sticking on the insects. And the more they move, the more pollen gets on them. And now this bee flew to another plant, another flower. And guess what will happen to the pollen? Because he's moving inside the flower, whether they want it or not, they're transferring the pollen. So see how he's moving. And then let me move back a little bit. And this flower is special because this part is stamen and this is the pistil. So when the bee lands on the pistil, then the pollen that was sticking on its leg naturally falls off from it, and then it goes through the pistil and goes down all the way to the ovary, where the fruit or seed is produced. So that's all for our lesson. That's it for our lesson today. Then let's do the quick check. Number 1, name the part of a flower that produces pollen. So where does pollen, so which part of the flower is producing the pollen? Is it stamen? So let me show you this photo. Is it stamen? Is it pistil? Is it petal? We know that pistil is the pollen receiver. Then it's going to be stamen because the part is covered with pollen. And number 2, name 3 ways a plant can be pollinated. So what is the first way? First one is self-pollination, because they can just transfer the pollen within itself. The second one is wind. And third way is through animals or insects. Okay, so 4th graders, there is a online assignment on flowers, and I want you to try that on your own after listening to this lesson. And if you have any questions, please feel free to ask me through Google Classroom or or through class website. I will always be available. So I hope you enjoy your learning, and I will see you later. Bye-bye.